It's crazy to think that a plant is putting people away for life.
It's time to consider cannabis. I'm your host, Curtis. In this week's episode, we're going to sit down with Glenn Keeling. Now, Glenn is a man who uses cannabis to treat his Crohn's disease. But Glenn isn't just going to bring his medical testimony to us this week. He's also going to bring to us a word of warning. And it's a warning that anyone considering using cannabis as medicine should take to heart. So join us, and we'll consider cannabis together. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me this morning.
Thank you for having me on.
So you have a unique story, but before we really get into that, I'd like to just get to know you a little bit better. So could you tell us how long have you been involved with cannabis?
Been involved with cannabis a really long time. We'll start when I got sick in '96. They diagnosed me with Crohn's. And for the first, I thought, do what the doctors say, because they're doctors. They know what they're doing. They know what they're supposed to be doing. So for the first almost 2 years, I followed doctor's orders. I took the medicine like I was supposed to, did the injections, did the therapies and everything. But as time went on, they started prescribing more medicine because it wasn't enough. So they started giving me more and more. It come to the point where I couldn't go more than 2 feet from my bed. So it sucked, really. I don't know how else to explain it. Here's a guy that's 25 years old that can't go more than 2 feet from his bed. His mom has to take care of him. His sisters and brothers have to cater to him. I'm 25 years old and like a baby. Got too much for me. The doctor said, well, it's not working. I need something else. We need to do something else. Nothing else for you. Crohn's, there's no cure. We can put it in remission, but it's not going to cure you. He said, what about cannabis medically? Okay, well, Ohio, there was no programming, even in the near future for it. So I had to resort to moving to another state to use cannabis. And that was back in '96. To today, I am pharmaceutical free thanks to cannabis. I have some kind of life because of cannabis, and I'm thankful for that.
Would you be willing to go into what it means to have a Crohn's flare-up?
It's pretty bad. You have runs really bad. You can't get out. It hurts to move around, walk. You're afraid to do anything because at any moment your bowels could let loose. I mean, you could be in the middle of a basketball game and you splattered the court. Nobody wants to play basketball with you no more. It's excruciating pain. Sometimes it feels like there's honestly a hot poker just shoved in one end, and it's just in there just twirling around, having a heyday with your innards.
Oh, wow.
It's not a fun time. Your muscles seem to tense up everywhere, especially your midsection, your legs, it's kind of really crazy, everything that's connected, and you don't think that's connected. But when you have a Crohn's flare-up, you definitely realize everything that's connected, body-wise.
Right.
It's not a lot of fun.
So the pills that the doctors gave you, what did they do for your flare-ups?
At first, it helped control them. It helped the muscle spasms and stuff, but eventually it started not to do it. I started having more spasms. I started to have more flare-ups on a daily basis, to where I get up and move around. And of course, activity gets your body moving. Everything in your body starts moving. Well, for somebody with Crohn's that's going through a flare-up, any kind of movement's not good for you. Trust me. But it did help control the flare-ups. It gave me an appetite to let me, made me eat more. That's about the only good thing I could say about it. And that was only at first, because eventually wasn't enough. They had to add more. I was taking more injection. It started out where I was just doing an injection every 2 weeks to where I was doing an injection every 3 days.
Oh, wow.
Because it just wasn't enough for me. And that's what somebody with Crohn's has to look forward to with the pharmaceuticals. It's not enough.
So somebody is going to listen to this podcast who has Crohn's and they want to consider using cannabis, but they don't really know if that's the right move for them. What is treating Crohn's with cannabis like, and how does it compare to the pharmaceutical route?
Oh wow. Every morning I get up, I'll have like some kind of edible or something, or I'll mostly dab vape oil. I'm able to eat. I think the last flare up I had, and I've been using cannabis pretty regularly for pretty strong for the last almost 5 years, really strongly every single day. But I think the last flare up I had was back in March. So the flare up, the appetite, my wife able to, I'll tell you what, I know that somebody with Crohn's has gone through this where they get a call from a friend and say, hey, we're all getting ready to go to dinner. Why don't you come and join us? Yeah, okay, cool. I'll be there. Well, as they're getting ready, their nerves and the anticipation of going out starts to mess with them. And all of a sudden, well, now their whole insides are just completely erect, and they're going to have to call that friend and say, hey, I'm going to have to stay in tonight. I wish I could join you guys. There's a lot of them nights for people with Crohn's that end up calling a friend or calling a loved one and canceling plans or rescheduling because of flare up. I've not had to reschedule or change my plans in a long time because of my Crohn's. And it is because I treat with cannabis. And it's not just, I mean, my wife, she suffers with MS, and I've watched it with MS tremendously also. Cannabis there's a whole host of, listen, cannabis needs to be part of a person's day to day diet. And in order for us to, we're like clocks, and order for those clocks to tell the exact time the way it's supposed to, you need all them cogs and all them pieces working exactly the way it's supposed to. Cannabis is a big cog in a person's life. And every single day, somebody without cannabis is going through and they're not telling the time properly. Their body is not properly doing what they're supposed to. When you add cannabis to your body, there's a system in there that's called the endocannabinoid system, that when cannabis is introduced to that, it becomes like a shock wave through your system. It wakes it up. Cannabis, with all of its components, there's over 400 chemicals in cannabis. With all of them together, and with your endocannabinoid system, your body actually starts to do what it's supposed to do. Without cannabis, people need those pharmaceuticals because the pharmaceuticals are taking the synthetic place of cannabis in our body. And I just tell anybody that's suffering from Crohn's, MS, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, a whole host of things, that please introduce cannabis to your life somehow, whether you vape it, whether you eat it, whether you use it as a patch or a topical. May I encourage people to give cannabis a fair shot.
Yeah, and if they're out there listening, don't be afraid to microdose in the beginning and gradually introduce it into your system. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. You don't have to really overdo it.
Right,
Just give it a shot.
right.
So that's interesting. So would you say that your flare-ups have gone down to just like one or two a year, or?
Less than 5 a year. We'll say that. Less
Nice.
than
Okay.
5 a year as far as flare ups go. And that's with cannabis. And my wife will tell you that absolutely no pharmaceuticals. I don't take pharmaceuticals. I'm just not a pharmaceutical kind of guy. I'm the cannabis guy. I am not a medical profession at all. Definitely, if this is something that you want to do, definitely talk to somebody in the medical field, your doctor to start with. And if he's not willing to discuss it with you, maybe think about changing doctors. Back in 2016, uh, they decided that, Ohio is ready and mature enough that they're going to give a shot at some kind of legalization. So, which come into effect September 8th of 2016. There was a lot of senators and a lot of Ohio representatives that's on the board that made statements back in October telling people that, listen, Ohio's got this program in now. John Kasich signed it into effect, and it come into effect September of 2016. We got to work everything out, but we have a cannabis program in Ohio. And one representative went so far as say, listen, you get a doctor to say, give you a recommendation, and state of Ohio will honor that because we have a program. My wife and I thought, well, hey, let's give Ohio a shot. So we seen a doctor. We got a recommendation to treat with cannabis. So from October of 2016 on, my wife and I have seen the doctor every 90 days, and we've paid our little fee every 90 days like the hundreds of other Ohioans have. And at the time, I was the executive director of West Central Ohio Normal. Normal standing for the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. My wife was the secretary. We were also both representatives of SWAV, which is Spirits with a Vision, an indigenous group here in the States that is federally recognized. I even ran for mayor 2016 for the community that we live in. My wife and I both, we ran meetings every week, twice a week actually. We're both ordained marriage counselors. So we have people that would come to us for marriage counseling and marriage issues and single issues too. It wasn't just married people, but we ran meetings, and I ran for mayor, and everything was good. We were telling people, preaching about cannabis. Listen, you got issues and things, go see a doctor, get your recommendation. You're good. Ohio will honor it. That's what we thought because we got a medical program. Well, October 31st of 2017, about 9:30 at night, we get a knock on a door. I answer it. And there is a squad of officers outside of my home.
Wow.
There's 9 of them standing at my front door. And come find out there's 4 more in the back of my house. And I think there's 2 or something on the side of my house. Now, I'm kind of really surprised by this. We're community activists. We're community leaders. We do outreach programs for things, and now there's cops at our house. And he hands me a search warrant and tells me that they're here for my drugs and anything else that I have in the house that's illegal. And well, the only thing I have is right here. So I went over and got my wife some fine medicine because we keep it in a little spot, and I hand it to him. Hey, here you go. And what else? He said, oh, well, there's illegal activities going on here. You guys are drug dealers. You're horrible people. There's people complaining about the traffic in the neighborhood. Well, there's no traffic. I don't understand what traffic. I try to explain to him that, we have meetings here at our house. We have a nice sized living room and dining room where we could fit quite a few people in. So, we have meetings here. We do marriage counseling. My wife and I are both medical patients. And the cops scoffed and said, medical patients? Ohio doesn't have a medical program. I don't care about that. And I said, but look, I have my paperwork and I have my card, or my, the card that they give you with your affirmative defense. He says, well, I don't care about that. It's not important. You guys are drug dealers. You guys package it up, and the proof's right here. So now my wife and I, between the 2 of us, we have a total of 27 felonies, 4 misdemeanors between the 2 of us. And between us, we're looking at rough 111 years in prison.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's because we're medical patients. And again, yes, I admit there was traffic that come here. We had meetings twice a week. We had meetings for SWAV. We had a meeting for normal. We had people that come here several times a day for marriage counseling. Poker. We have a list of 60 people that have said absolutely the same thing that I'm telling you, that there's no illegal activity going on here. but they're said because there was an abundant amount of traffic in our neighborhood and that they know that there is cannabis here because, again, keeping with transparency, I ran for mayor. We both were leaders of groups of civil and human rights groups. So I wanted to keep transparency. So when we did become medical patients, I copied that paperwork and I took it up to chief of police here in our community, Paul May, and I gave them to him. And I told him, hey, I want you to know my wife and I are medical patients. Here's our recommendations, everything. He said, okay, yeah, all right, good deal. No problem. We thought there was no problem until they knocked on our door. And now we've been fighting since October 31st of 2017, going through this cannabis case. And again, like I said, we have 10 felony possession of cannabis charges. The thing about that is that even though that we are being charged with possession of cannabis, the court, Mercer County courts, have allowed my wife and I to use exactly the thing that they're charging us with. So on our bond paperwork, when we signed our OR bonds, it says one of our stipulations is we're not allowed to go in a bar, we can't drink, but damn it, we can sure smoke a joint, we can sure vape, we can sure eat that edible, but we're charged with possession of cannabis.
How did you end up with 10 felony charges if you just had your stash? One stash equals 10 charges. I'm confused.
It is kind of, well, between my wife and I, we're both cannabis patients. So we're allowed to have a certain amount for a 90-day supply. We didn't have quite that amount for the two of us. I mean, we had pretty close to what we were allowed to have. What they have done is they have broken down the flower cannabis. That is a possession charge, a couple of them. The cannabis oil, CO2 oil, which they are claiming CO2 oil is hash. We also had some vape cartridges. That is what they're also considering hash.
So every little individual bit they found is a different charge.
Right. Yeah. The edibles that we had two different kind of edibles. We had some peanut butter balls and we had some ice cream. So of course the peanut butter balls, that's a felony possession of cannabis because there's cannabis in that, and the ice cream is a felony possession because there's cannabis in that. And then of course there's a couple of charges that comes with it, dealing with the flower, 3 possession charges dealing with the oil and the CO2. So it's every one of them, they've got a couple of possession charges with each specific area of what we're allowed to have.
Could you speak a little bit more to the timeline? So you've come back to Ohio and you're running normal meetings?
I come back to Ohio probably 8 years ago, met my current wife, and we started getting active in cannabis because it was something that we both needed. At the time, she was taking 22 pills and 3 injections a week, and that was just too much. So we were advocating and pushing for cannabis in Ohio. At the beginning of close to 2015, when the Ohio Rights Group and OR started pushing for a cannabis in Ohio, that's when we really got involved and started running a chapter in Ohio. It is in 2015.
And in that process, as you're being more and more of kind of activist, that's when you decided to run for mayor?
Yes. Yeah.
So how long after you decided to run for mayor did you go to the sheriff and tell them or give them the paperwork saying I am a legitimate medical use?
We got our recommendation in October of 2016. And I was still campaigning and going through my campaign at the time because the election was November 6th of 2016. So
how long after you giving him that paperwork did you have the raid?
1 year, almost 1 year.
1 year.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Well, see, while I was running for mayor and running meetings and everything, it was fine. When it did come to the election, when I did lose, unfortunately, we started getting hassled at our meeting place. The cops started sitting outside of it. They would come in and question, well, what are you guys selling? What are you guys doing? So the people that let us run our public meetings, they kind of started so that you're bringing too much attention here. You can't run it here no more. So that's when it was probably January of 2017 when my wife and I decided, well, look, the public is kind of getting kind of inky about it. We don't have our public speech no more. Why don't we just do it at the house? There's plenty of space, so that's what we did. So it was probably early to mid January of 2017 when we started running meetings out of the home. We've always met people at our home for counseling. That's something that's private. That's where we felt more comfortable talking with people. So they came to the house anyway.
So do you feel like this was
Targeted?
Do you feel like you were targeted?
Well, yeah, kind of, sort of. The attorneys have approached that idea. Of course, Peggy and I both have really good attorneys that have been fighting this case for us and with us for over a year now. But yeah, they said, listen, you think about people being out drinking all night. The person that's going to speed home with the cranking of the loud music, that guy's probably going to get pulled over. But if you leave the bar and you're real quiet and you drive the speed limit just under and you drive really nice and everything, you're going to make it home. But that guy that real loud and sped through town, is going to get pulled over. That's what they referred us to. My wife and I were like the speeding drunk because we were really out front of the cannabis thing. We were really out there pushing for it and talking to everybody that would listen to us. She would tell her story. I mean, she has an amazing story that has gone from where she has gone in her life. We were just right out front telling people, 'cause we weren't afraid of it because we thought we were doing right.
Yeah, but just because you're an easy target doesn't make you not a target.
Right. Well, see, we assumed because we did what we were told that you see a doctor and they recommend it, then you can use it. That's your medicine. That's what we believed. And that's what we were almost 2 years on it of thinking that, we're in the right. We paying the doctor every 3 months like we're supposed to. And then find out that we're really not protected somehow, some way. They're going to find some kind of fault with us being patient. And that's really what it comes down to. We're not drug dealers. We're not bad people. We're just cannabis patients that want to protect and love our daughter. That's it. I don't see much else that would warrant anything other than coming to our house, other than the fact that they knew we were cannabis patients.
How are you guys with your neighbors and the community around you?
The people around us are nice. The next door neighbor will come over quite often. The guy across the street, real good friends with him. Nobody in the immediate area had a problem with, what was going on. They knew that we were running meetings. The guy that lived across the street was our treasurer. So people in our immediate area knew exactly what was going on because we communicated. Listen, you want to know something? Come to our house. You want to see what's going on? Come knock on my door. You're more than welcome to have a chair and listen to what's going on in our home. It was the people that was at the edge of the neighborhood that seen the traffic coming in. That was the issue. And of course, nobody ever wants to knock on a door and say, hey, I've seen a bunch of cars at your house. What's going on? They would just rather run to the cops and say, hey, there's drug dealing going on down there. I know it is because there's traffic going to their house.
That's interesting. I never would have imagined. I mean, when I think about neighbors complaining about traffic, it's like that white car that pulls up to the house, the teenage kid runs out to the car really quick and then runs back inside and the car drives away. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
that's what so it's interesting that's what they're using against you. It seems to defy logic, really.
It really does. Again, the crazy thing is we're being charged with this, but I have paperwork sitting right here that says even though we're being charged with it, we're allowed to use exactly what we're being charged with. How crazy that in itself is crazy.
How many times have you been in front of the judge?
We have actually only been in front of the judge 3 times.
3 times?
We have had, between the two of us, we've had 13 attorney conferences, and most of them attorney conferences were just by the phone. I don't know what's going on. It's kind of wild and kind of crazy because for all case and purposes, my wife and I pretty much have our life. We can pretty much go where we need to go, do what we want to do. We just can't leave the state of Ohio. And oh yeah, we're looking at 111 years between us in prison for cannabis.
Wow.
And that's what I mean, we're going through this, yes, but we try to live every day to some kind of normalcy. And it's hard to, because at the end of the day, I mean, she's looking at 52 years and I'm looking at 56 years in prison. And that's for following state law using cannabis. We did not have 30, 40 pounds. We only simply had just barely a pound of product of medicine. And that's with everything all together, for the both of us.
Is that just flour you're talking about?
Well, no, it's a combination. That we had flour, we had cannabis oil, we had wax, we had some vape pens,
Right.
and then we had edibles. I don't exactly know how, because we only had 256 grams of flour, and I think 71 grams of CO2 oil.
Okay.
So where the rest of that is coming from the weight of the edibles, and the I guess they're weighing the entire vape cartridge, because I mean,
Right.
the weights just don't really add up to what they're saying, unless you're looking at the weight of, the ice cream or each individual peanut butter ball, I mean, but I mean, what they're saying, either way it goes, we did not have nearly half of what 2 patients need for what is quoted for a 90-day supply. You can have the flour, the wax or oil, the topical patch, all of that equals up to only 8 ounces. You can't exceed more than 8 ounces, and that's a total of everything of medicine together. And we didn't have that between the two of us. But yet we're facing some crazy amount of charges that no two people should be facing.
And I'd assume that somewhere in the process you had the opportunity to present your affirmative defense to the judge.
Yes. Yeah. The judge asked, it was at our preliminary hearing. He asked, well, if you can show that at the time of this you were medical patients, then I'll allow you to use your medicine. We did. I mean, obviously, we had paperwork with the dates in order, with everything in order for that particular time. Again, we've been medical patients since 2016, October 2016. So we definitely made sure that every 90 days we go and see our doctor, we pay that money, and we get that piece of paper. We didn't want to break the law, and that's what it really comes down to. Is we really didn't want to break the law. We didn't know we were breaking the law. I mean, because we thought we were following what law said.
I guess I'm confused. Like, what law are they saying you broke? Is it the drug dealing? That's what they're really going after you with, or is there some other avenue they're trying to?
Well, they manufacturing. We have a felony one, manufacturing, because we had sucker sticks and some stickers. We're consulting with a company from Michigan that was working on a new label for their design. So we had their label in our house, and the sucker sticks was my daughter's craft project. It was an unopened bag of sucker sticks. The very first time I went to court, with the cop sitting on the stand, and he testified, I believe Glenn takes a propane torch and melts Jolly Ranchers down to make infused suckers. Those are his exact words. On stand, he swears that I use a propane torch to melt Jolly Ranchers down to make infused suckers.
And then you're distributing them?
Yeah, apparently. Well, we belong to a collective because there's no place in Ohio to get your medicine. So, of course, your medicine's going to have to come from out of state or a black market. Can't trust the black market. We want medical product. I mean, that's what we need. That's what we want. So we belong to a collective that will bring it and has brought it here. They brought it in a big slab one time. Well, we don't know what to do off of that. So we did nothing more than take our big bottle of medicine and put it in our weekly divider is what we did.
Right.
So we know what we can use on a day-to-day basis, and that's what we did. So we took our big slab and we manufactured, because manufacturing is where you take product, repackaging it, redoing anything. That's all under, manufacturing. So that is another part where the manufacturing comes from. We also have a child endangerment because we have a 14-year-old daughter lives here. I don't know where else she's going to live, but they seem to be perfectly okay with letting her mom and I have all the pharmaceuticals in the world that we want. She was perfectly fine here. But the first time that we used cannabis for our medicine, we have completely put her in danger. So that is another one of our charges is child endangerment.
Just to go back for a quick second on the manufacturing part, does that mean that people who buy flower from a dispensary can't make an edible out of it themselves?
So that's pretty much what they're saying is don't go to the store and buy the ingredients to make spaghetti and take it home and make spaghetti, because then you just manufactured something.
Spaghetti.
Right. Absolutely. That is absolutely, and
Wow.
that is how crazy our laws are. That is absolutely ridiculous.
Wow.
And that's exactly what happened. And truthful, honest to God, hands down, we got a slab of CO2 oil and we broke it down into our daily dose because it was easier that way. And I did not think that I was doing wrong. Again, I had medicine in my house and all I did was I put it down for my daily dosing. I put it down for my wife's daily dosing. And they said that I repackaged to resell it. Now listen, I'm going to tell you that when I got that big slab, it cost us quite a bit of money. And for me to break it down and to resell it, 65 bucks a gram, nobody wants to pay that. That's ridiculous. So, I mean, there is no resale value when a patient buys our medicine. There is no compensating back anything.
When you were storing your flower, was it all in different packages? Was it separated by strains, or was it
No, it was just in a bag. No, there was two bags. One was an indica and the other one was a sativa. I'm sorry. Yeah, there was two separate bags.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of baggies. They didn't confiscate none of that stuff from our house. They did take probably about $9,000 worth of unused pipes and grinders and papers and a whole host of paraphernalia that was unused that we would set up on tables and booths and for sale. When we go to events or something, normal and suave, we'd set up a booth. These are just things that we sold for normal. These are just items that this is all the kind of stuff that we'd set up at a booth and sell for the different organizations. So they got all that stuff and they got our medicine. They didn't, raid our house and they got a whole bunch of baggies of different stuff. They only really took pretty much an organization's stuff, really, and Peggy's and my medicine is what they got.
What's next for you guys?
Next is hopefully just to get through this case. Since this has gone on, of course, you know that they have kind of disbanded Ohio Normal. So my wife and I were kind of lost, and we found a new home with a group that's called the Human Solution International. a wonderful group. It's a human rights group. And Peggy and I now head up the Ohio chapter of the Human Solution International. And that chapter is called the Creative Care Beacon. And what we do is we provide court support for people. We're doing letter writing campaigns. I don't know if people know or not, but there's 25 people that are serving life sentences here in the United States for cannabis. And that's cannabis. They're going to be there the rest of their lives. And some of these guys have already been there 20, 30 years. We deal with a guy, George Martirano, who is involved with the Human Solution. He served 32 consecutive years in prison for an ounce of pot.
Oh, wow.
Right? There's a guy right now in Terre Haute, Indiana, Craig Cecil. Yeah, he was just the mechanic for this trucking company that these people use to transport cannabis for. He had no clue that that's what they were doing. He was the mechanic. He is serving life without parole in Terre Haute, Indiana, for being a mechanic in a cannabis industry, I guess. But he had no clue. You got Lance Glore, who is in Washington, who worked in a legal dispensary that is fighting his case. He's been in 2 years now. He was looking at 10 years. He's in Sheridan Correctional Institute. That's in Oregon. Yeah, it's in Oregon. You know, these people are serving time for a plant. And most of these people that are serving time for a plant are in legal states. And that is why I don't really like the word legalization, because legalization brings a lot more issues and a lot more problems on top of what you already had to begin with. Yeah, it's crazy to think that a plant is putting people away for life. And that's still today, 2018. There's people all over Ohio that are looking at, cases for possession of cannabis because they follow doctor's recommendation. You've got cases all the time in California. Every single day, you've got dispensaries that are being raided. These are legal places. Colorado, you've got patients that are being arrested daily because they're being patients. That's it. And that's sad. In 2018, people have to be fearful because of a plant. I think there's way more things for, law enforcement to concentrate more on and to look at than people that use cannabis to treat ailments that they will never recover from. I mean, think of this. My wife will lose her life to MS. I will lose my life to Crohn's. People will lose their life to lupus, to cancer, to AIDS on a day-to-day basis, every single day. But we have a plant that could eliminate that, could stop that. I know it can. I know it will. I've watched it, cannabis eat cancer off somebody's skin and heal their skin cancer. I've watched it heal lung cancer. I've seen it eat tumors. I mean, I'm not a medical doctor. I'm just a long-haired, bearded guy that really believes that cannabis is a life-saving ingredient to our life, and that no one should ever go to prison or jail for a plant, ever.
Do you have a GoFundMe or anything to help
I
your
don't.
cause, or you?
I don't have a GoFundMe. We do have, like I said, if you want to go, people want to go to the Creative Care Beacon, the chapter of Human Solution, and donate there. You don't even have to donate something. I urge you to find somebody that is going through a case somewhere, sometime, or somebody that's serving a sentence, and write them a letter or show up in court, just for support. That's what I ask for people to do. There's a lot of people out there that can't ask for that I'm asking for that for them. Find somebody that's already in prison, that's serving time. Write your governor, call your governor, reach out. That's all I can say is just reach out. Creative Care Beacon, the Human Solution International Ohio chapter. be a good place to start for a lot of people.
All right, Glenn, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you, Curtis.
Cannabis is against the law. Or should I say, the law is against cannabis. For the purpose of the law is to keep us safe and out of harm's way. To keep us in line so we don't step out of bounds and hurt ourselves or others. If that is the spirit behind the authority of the law, then the laws against cannabis that are being used to persecute patients like Glenn Keeling, those laws are truly unjust and should be changed. Cannabis is not hurting patients or the neighbors of patients. How then is it just for a plant that brings relief to Glenn for his Crohn's-related symptoms be the same plant that could land him in prison for the rest of his life? This is not right, America. This is not just. And I really want to know, how long are we going to accept this as the status quo? Now, cannabis had some victories on this last election cycle, but the struggle will continue until every non-violent cannabis-related offense is expunged from every American's record. Now, if our government would just do it, decriminalize cannabis and wipe the slate clean for non-violent cannabis offenders, that would be amazing. But that's not the America that I think we live in. Maybe I'm wrong, but it appears that the financial opportunities are what will bring about cannabis law reform. It won't be because it's the right thing to do. It'll be because of greed. Consider Cannabis is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment recommendations. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider for any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. If you'd like to be a guest and share how cannabis has helped your health and wellness, contact me at considercannabisnow.com or on the Consider Cannabis Facebook page. If you have found anything of value in this episode, please share it with someone else. Remember to subscribe for free and get every new episode delivered right to your phone. Join me next time and we'll consider cannabis together.